Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast, where we highlight ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble. Our guest today on the podcast is Jefe Lester, also known as Jefe. Jeff has been on quite the pirate journey. He has made radical life changes, going from the victim of circumstances around him to becoming the hero of his story. Jeff chose to find strength in life's adversity and steered his ship into the world of yoga and meditation, where he now shares his love of self-inquiry with others. Jeff, you have quite the long story of going against the status quo and rebelling against the stories that you were told. Lead us through that journey of what led you to become a pirate.
I love that question. First of all, thank you guys for having me on.
Thanks for
I
being
am
here.
always excited to share my journey because I get to reflect on it. And I get to every time I tell a part of my story, I get another golden nugget or something else that comes through. And I figured you might ask me something to that effect. So I was considering, where do I put a pin in my journey of a shift in my life? Because I can go back and consider many shifts that have led me up to being where I am now. And they are these significant moments of a new thought appearing or a new perspective opening itself, myself opening up to that. And the one that came to me as I was considering it just before coming on was a moment, a very significant moment that didn't necessarily bear fruit until years later. And to get to that moment, I want to tell you about a little bit about my backstory, and that I grew up very obese. I grew up in a household that there was a lot of addiction. There was a lot of we could say projection if we're going to talk about language later, and a lot of also emotional abuse, and of course all of this happening at the very unconscious level. So I never put blame onto my family or my mother or my upbringing or any of that, because, like, thank goodness it led me to being how I am now, and it led me to really some great insights. So to start this, I was walking uphill going to exercise. I was going to work out. I was going to go to the gym at the university I was studying at the time. And I had a very potent and interesting thought occur to me. And to give you some insight into that, before what that thought was, is I was studying mechanical engineering at one of the most prestigious schools for that in the world. And I was just in my journey of a complete outer transformation. So I said that I was really overweight, and I really mean that. I weighed 290 pounds at my heaviest. Right now I weigh around 170. And when I left home, things started to shift. So being in that environment and then coming out of that environment, things started to shift for me. And I went on a beautiful weight loss journey, absolutely crushed all the limiting beliefs around losing weight that I had, because it was something I wanted to do for years. And luckily I got out of that environment, got into a school, and went and did the program at their gym around weight loss. And I had a group of people around me. We were all in the same ship. We had instructors, and I was getting the education around lifestyle and diet that I had never had before. And also, even if I knew what was right, there was so much deeply patterned. And for me, food was the addiction. Like I say, I grew up in a household full of addiction. For me, I took food. So there was drugs, alcohol, and pharmaceuticals. And I was like, I'll take food, guys. That would be my addiction. And so obviously that led itself to me being very, like, morbidly obese and out of shape and at risk for all kinds of conditions that could have happened for me later along in life. And so thank goodness I got into this program, and I was inspired. Like, I was really excited to lose the weight. And especially after a month of really showing up, I could see my body changing shape. So when we're that big, it's difficult to see 5 or 10 pounds come off. But when it's 25 pounds, I saw it in my face. My body was changing shape. So it was a profound shift to see myself in the mirror. And that was the momentum I needed. It was a real impression that shifted my emotion, and my really gave me excitement and enthusiasm for a different lifestyle rather than a diet. And I lost 60, 70, 80 pounds by the time I'm here walking up this hill. And I had transferred into this school, and mechanical engineering. Let me give you a background on that. A lot of science, got to be a great student. I loved being a great student and doing good in class, because it was this other side of me where I could get attention and significance, even though I was really overweight, and I wasn't getting any of those, well, we'll call them needs, that I wanted met through being a very obese person, not and as a guy too, not physically attractive in my perception. And also, sports and things like that were definitely not in my repertoire at that time. So it became, the way I got that attention, or the way I got that sense of significance, was through excelling in academics. And my grandfather happened to go to this particular school. And so I needed to follow in my grandfather's footsteps, according to my mother, and do really good in school. And so all of these things were lining up, that I was going on this journey that was very much not of myself, because I never gave myself the time to consider what is my essence, like the whole journey leading up to this point. So I had started, after this weight loss, I transferred schools and I started teaching group fitness classes, and I absolutely loved it. And I recognized that, wow, it's the first time in my life that I really am actively engaging in something that I love. And on the side of it is, now I'm starting to have a different perspective on my career in academia as a student, and where am I going to take this degree, this fancy degree, if I'm not really interested in it, if I'm not really into it. So I started asking myself these really great questions of, how am I gonna do this in a way that I like it, right? I'm walking up the hill to go to the gym, and the thought popped into my head of, I never liked this. I never liked any of this. And it was the thought relative to the schooling, the education that I was getting. And I would show up to my classes, I would bust my ass, I did my best to get A's. And this thought came into my head of, I never liked any of this. And it's in the midst of questioning, like, I want to do what I like. I want to do what I want. I figured out something that I really, really like. And so that thought came in, and it was, let's say it created a big crack in the foundation of my self-perception, my identity. And fast forward 3 years later to, well, closer to 2 years later, where I was now studying a master's degree. So apparently I hadn't listened to that thought well enough. My mother had passed away. So some other very significant life events had happened. I continued to pursue health and fitness because I knew it was, well, it became my new addiction. It became the next way of doing whatever I could to not still listen to that voice in my head, but I knew I loved it. I knew I loved it. And I'm a year into a master's degree in France that's taught in English. And I was on my way to do a dual degree program that was taught in French. And it was at this point, I was so over my courses, so completely over it. And I had started diverting so much more of my energy and attention towards my health, my wellness, in a way that I would say at this point wasn't really that healthy. It was a lot more should oriented and a lot more pressure oriented, because I just replaced the seat of that significance to something else. So I was still not meeting my need in a very healthy way, in a very way that is indicative of self-love. So I organized a community at this school, at this campus where I was studying in France, because they have very, in small town France, they have very little to do with group fitness. People go out and they walk and they run and things like that, but there was very little group fitness where I'm from, where I was at the time. So I got together with a group of students, peers. I formed a boot camp class, a weekly boot camp class where I trained and I taught them the class as well. I had a friend who I met and she taught yoga. So she was teaching yoga and I was giving weekly runs. So we had 3 classes a week, and I started just adoring that time of my week and dreading the other side of my coursework, to the point where it got so overwhelming for me and I was so behind that I was in a really negative headspace about my courses and about my future with this and everything like that. And I was also doing things that I really didn't like in terms of my integrity, and that would be like asking fellow students to work together on homework, i.e. copying their homework, and all those little cheats that really, at the end of the day, when I reflect on myself and I want to be a person in integrity, and I've always had that for myself, that wasn't an alignment for me. So I had all this cognitive dissonance in my life of, this is really what I'm dreading and this is really what I'm loving. And here's another moment, and I'm walking again. Walking is I've had some of my most profound shifts on walks. I'm walking back from campus, going to my dorm, and I'm all up in my head about the negative, the drama, the dread of my course and what am I going to do, and all these catastrophe scenarios and failing classes and everything like that. And I look over to the right, and to the right is the football field or the soccer field where we would do our boot camp classes, the training. And in that moment, I felt something in my body. It was the constriction, the tightness of all that weight I was putting on my shoulders about my school. And then when I looked up literally and saw the soccer field, and all of that weight melted away in that moment. And it was such a significant change from the two that I became aware of it. And I was like, whoa, what was that? And I realized that that's what I really love to do. And this is, so the beginning thought was, I never liked any of this anyway. And then this thought was, this is what I love to do. And it was a matter in that moment of giving myself, letting go of the pride of staying with the engineering and staying with what made my mother proud and with my perception around the status in society and the significance around being an engineer and that quote unquote life. I said, I've got to give myself the chance to do what I love. And that, like, in that moment, it was decided. I quit my program in my mind at that moment, and very shortly in reality after that, and started pursuing that. And that's the big shift that happened, leading me to go into yoga. And I've always loved traveling. Traveling is a big reason I chose to go to France for my master's degree. And traveling was a big, huge influence in my life of opening my mind up to different perspectives and different cultures and all these things that allow me to be more malleable in my perception of things. And so that moment, shifting from, okay, this pathway I have chosen, very much influenced by getting needs met for externalized rewards, being whether it be money, to please my mother, for significance, to be perceived as really smart by society. All of that started going out of the window, and I chose a new destiny. I chose a new pathway that really was following my dreams. It was following my heart. So it's like, thank goodness that I had the thoughts And then I paid attention to them and gave them enough attention for them to get roots into me and start to sprout something different in my life. Now, that was all before I was particularly, I would say this term, conscious in my life. And by that, I mean self-aware to a degree where I'm an observer of myself, and I'm not so stuck on my identity like I was. Yoga and meditation created a huge shift on that. That very moment where I decided that I was going to quit my degree, I transitioned from, okay, this is the way of life I have to do, to this is the life that I'm going to go for it. This is my go for it life. And so within 6 months, everything went really smoothly. I really believe when we honor that voice in our head that is in alignment with our dharma, with our spirit, doors open. The flow becomes more effortless. There's an energy, there's a wind behind our sails. So that's the experience I had, that everything fell into place very quickly to get me from where I was and to go to London, United Kingdom, London, England, where I wanted to pursue my passion for health and wellness. And so this was years now, a year and a half, 2 years into my journey of weight loss, really exploring nutrition and diets, really getting into fitness. Like, it became my new addiction, my new thing, my new identity. Within 2 days of going to London, I walked into the yoga studio where my whole life would change. And by that, I mean, all that really happened was I signed up for a 30-day introductory offer where I could go to as many yoga classes as I wanted in 30 days. And I didn't know very much about yoga. I'd been practicing yoga for some years as a stretch for my body. And at that point, I had yet to recognize or even understand the implications of yoga as a spiritual practice, as a self-development practice. And luckily, this yoga studio is all about that. And I, still being in the mindset of a college student, I was like, I paid 30 pounds, $45 or so for 30 days of yoga. I'm gonna go every day and make it as cheap as I possibly can. And that's when yoga works. That's when when we immerse ourselves in something, that's when we see the fruits of that really immediately. And I immediately started noticing so many different patterns in myself. And I got to wage new wars within myself. And what I mean when I say that is, well, I started to see with regular practice of yoga, and this is a physical practice. It was a physical practice that I liked because I was a very physically oriented person. I mean, I got into running marathons. Like I said, I was teaching and doing boot camp style fitness classes. So I loved that quality of fitness, that type of fitness. And so this yoga, power yoga, really suited me. And it still had an amazing impact on my mind because I, for the first time, was doing something in an immersive way that was allowing me to pay attention to myself, to be present, and to start to see these different aspects of myself that I hadn't given the attention to before. And what happened in those 30 days, in the subsequent year or so that I stayed in London and ended up working at that class, was I connected with the things I knew in my mind. They started to connect in my body and in my way of life. And to give an example of that is, okay, so when I had that thought of, I never liked any of this anyway, walking up the hill to go to the gym, reflecting about my courses and my pathway of being an engineer. When I had that thought, I really started questioning, okay, what can I do to be happy? What is happiness? And at the same time, I was enrolled in a business education course, which was one of those, as an engineer, it's like, as an engineering student, especially at this particular school, we celebrate having those classes because those are like softball, easy A. I can show up and get an A, basically. And she had us, Dr. Debbie, she had us read she gave us a list of books to read, and I chose How to Win Friends and Influence People. Have you guys heard of that book?
Yep.
Of course. That is like a quintessential self-development book from Dale Carnegie. And I loved that book. It was the most lit up about life, my life I've ever been, because I recognized by reading that book that I'd say for the first time in my life, other than the physical transformation, that was very much catalyzed by having a momentum and having support and everything like that. It was the first time in my life that I recognized through reading this book that I had agency, I had choice in my degree of how my quality of life. I could choose to behave differently and get a different experience in life. And so that was fascinating to me. And that led me to read a whole bunch of other books about it. Psychology books, self-development books, mindset books, habit books, performance books, you name it. I read dozens of them. And I fell into what I believe is a common pitfall of realizing that we've got to put the rubber to the road in order to make these changes happen. Reading the books doesn't make the changes happen. But my mind was hungry, and I was eager to learn more. And now fast forwarding from that moment to back in France, I'm jumping all over the timeline. I was back in France and I had read, 12, 15, 20 of these books like this. And I started to see the through lines within them all, and recognizing that, this is how you change a habit. This is how you do that. This is how you get this healthy, or whatever it is. And I was miserable. I was beside myself, miserable, not understanding why me knowing this wasn't necessarily translating to me being more happier in my life. Like, I'm doing the thing. Why am I not experiencing more happiness? I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself. It's a lot of like force, me more in a state of being forceful with myself and my change than anything. And I got to a moment in France, just shortly before the big pivotal moment of shifting my life. I had this thought, and it's one of the most depressing thoughts I've ever had, of, is this all there is? Like, do I know it all? And it wasn't like a do I know it all from being conceited or arrogant. It was like a very deflated, is this it? And then this is what I'm left with. My experience as it is this is the pinnacle. Like, this is incredibly underwhelming. So that feeling haunted me to some degree. And it wasn't until I got into the yoga studio and started physically practicing, moving my body, moving the energy in my body, connecting with the community, that I started to feel different in my body and my mind. And it was like, okay, here we go. There's something more to this. And just like that moment of, is this it? I've noticed there's been a few times in my life where I have the perception that I've figured it out, or that I know something. And that's always when I cut myself off. I recognize, thank goodness, that that's where I start to cut myself off from the infinite possibility that that I really truly have of choice, my ability to choose. And I'm so glad that, the universe, or whatever we want to call it, keeps giving me the opportunity to bust that bubble, because it always opens me up in a way that, sends me exploring again. And this yoga practice, I'd say it was the first thing that I really trusted to take me where I'm going. Before that, if you asked me what healing was, or like yoga, we could consider it a healing art, or I would say it's the original science of self-development, from the human being, for the human mind and body. And I didn't know what healing meant. I thought if I had a bruise and it went away, that was healing, right? Mm-hmm. I had no connection to the emotional scars on my head, but I had this chip on my shoulder at the same time, was because I grew up in that, I told you, like, the chaotic, tumultuous household where I saw a ton of drug abuse on my sister's side, drug addiction, my mother addicted to pharmaceutical medicine. I saw my mother lose her will to live, literally. I saw my uncle, I didn't see him commit suicide, but I saw the aftermath of his suicide. So I had some really big, poignant moments, traumatic experiences growing up. And I had that in the back of my head. It's like, nobody really knows me. This is a story I ran in the early days of yoga. Nobody really knows me unless they know what I've been through. And so that story was running in my head, and it really kept me from showing myself fully to people. I was always hiding in some capacity my true self, my true authenticity, and in this way I was hiding from getting to the root of it, getting to the center of it. What the yoga practice started to reveal to me is I had these other patterns that I wasn't even aware of before. And this awareness, let me just hang out for a second on what do I mean by awareness. And this is now coming from me as a person who teaches this. Awareness is when something that was unconscious becomes conscious. 95% of the time, we are operating on autopilot, some form of autopilot seated in how we learned to navigate life as a child, and the things that we did to adapt or cope in order to feel safe and to have those needs met. Like I said, I was getting a need for significance or for attention or whatever these different needs were, through ways that were taking me out of alignment from what's really truly I love to do, which I've learned now is to teach people, to express to people, to be in a group with people sharing what I love. And now, thank goodness, I do that. This awareness, though, it's like we have to understand. I've gone on a journey of understanding and getting more acquainted with, I don't know what I don't know. And until it presents itself to me, meaning it meets my awareness, that I'm paying attention to it, it will run my life in a way that is unconscious. So all the changes I tried to do and all the head banging I did against the wall of reading those books is so to say that there were things that I was unaware of that were running the show, and I had to develop my awareness in order to meet them, because otherwise I wasn't ready. There was nothing for me to do with them. And so this yoga practice, which it does, yoga is incredibly intelligent. Yoga is a science. Like when I say yoga, I mean so much more than the physical practice. And the physical practice has this effect as well. It grows our awareness. And so as my awareness grew, I became more aware of my dysfunctional relationship with food and how I would, I was still using food as a coping mechanism, numbing myself out, eating my feelings, running away by eating and not feeling things. And this whole recognition that, after years of paying attention to this, it's like, okay, so I grew up in some sort of intensity where my feelings were too much for me. And so I developed ways to not feel. And if I'm stuffed to the brim with food, then I'm going to be much more feeling the feeling of being stuffed than all the negative feelings that associate that I'm trying to push away. So that was a big pattern. And I think having this conversation for years now, I would say 8 out of 10 people easily have some sort of dysfunctional relationship with food. So I think that our relationship with food is a low-hanging fruit for us to gain awareness of ourselves and start to go deeper into the pattern. Like what is the root of that, rather than I'm going to try diet after diet and fad after fad to try and fix me, when there's nothing really to be fixed. It's just to let the energy that wants to be seen and experienced, the emotion, through, instead of suppressing it through some kind of mechanism or addiction or numbing coping strategy. So I got into food, and I realized I was binge eating a lot, and I would get really frustrated with binge eating and really self-critical about it. And what's the best way to deal with that as a binge eater? Well, it's to eat some more, because I can't hear my voice if I'm eating too. So my inner voice. So yoga and all these other, I will unpack yoga a little bit more. Meditation, the original skill of of developing awareness, paying attention to the moment, the present moment, and self-inquiry, writing things down. We're going to talk about that. Let's see how we go. And writing things down and answering questions, being asked questions, asking myself questions, and in this way, using the mind to really explore and navigate around the ego structure or the identity we've put around a certain thing, and see what other perspectives are there. So yoga, this whole practice of elevating awareness, has that effect of me getting to know myself and getting to know what's mine, what aligns with me and my spirit, my personality, my deepest personality, and what did I take on from the outside world, from all these impressions that we get when we're young, from the media, from culture, from school when we're growing up. And it's like that stuff isn't necessarily me. So I have to put it to the magnifying glass and see, does it align? Does it feel right? Does it feel like me? And if it's not, it will inevitably fall away. If I stay in my practice of self-awareness, of being in my center, so to speak, rather than being oriented externally, and trying to meet those needs that are mine in an external validation way or an externalized way. So that practice got me hyper aware of my relationship with food. And it was the first thing that really came to the surface that I had to work on. And years of paying attention to that and recognizing, okay, so I want to grow in this. I want to get better at this. And this is what I mean when I put my trust in yoga, my faith in yoga. It's very similar, I believe, to somebody whose framework is biblical, and they say, I've been saved. They gave up, they put everything in the hands of God, and they say, okay, I trust you. Everything is all right. I trust your divine power and influence. Here you go. And in that way, giving everything to that. I did something very similar to that with yoga. I said, okay, I recognize there's things I don't know and I want help. Here, yoga, here, my practice, help me. And it's very much, and this is the pirate part of it. I say I was putting my life into, in the hands of yoga, so to speak. And what that really translates, what it really means to me now is I was putting myself into my own hands because it was my practice of yoga that I recognized was making the impact. It was me showing up to that. So I said to myself, basically in no uncertain terms, made a bargain with myself of, I'm going to continue to show up to practice these practices that have brought this awareness to me. And I let go of everything else. I'm going to let that show me the way. And so in that way, it was an incredibly empowering stage of my life where I started to see me doing something, having an effect, this healing and effect of my life, and recognizing there's things I don't know and I don't need to know them. All I need to know is that I show up to my practice. And yoga had such a powerful influence on me that after that 30-day program, I was addicted. It was the next addiction. And I think that I'm leveling up in addictions every step of the way, first food and then running, I would say, and then power yoga. So all these things getting more healthy and more of service to my spirit. I did a lot of work around the healing around my relationship with food. Of course, that was very intense for me because it was under a big magnifying glass at the time. And I started to know very quickly that I want to teach yoga. Like, for me, the thing that I really know is in my dharma, it feels like my soul's purpose, or my being here, the reason I'm here, is to teach, to present, to be in front of people and to offer them something of value, an experience or share myself to people. And so I did the training. And first of all, anybody who's done a yoga teacher training or has experienced something to the effect of a yoga teacher training, we became family. We were in it together, and I really became family intimately with people who I had never met before the training, and people I had just met. And it's like, wow, I'm more close with you because we're going on this journey of self-development, of growth together, than I've ever been with any of my friends back home. And it was the early stages of me recognizing, and thank goodness they really showed me the way, a lot of these friends of mine, the value of being vulnerable and the value of opening up and opening ourselves up. So that was a very special journey. And ever since then, I've taken it and ran, because I knew that I had the very deep-seated belief of this is it, meaning in some way, shape, or form, I'm going to be teaching people yoga, whether it's the physical practice or meditation, the awareness practice, the training of the mind practice, the self-development practices, educating people how to become their biggest asset in terms of their life, their growth, taking responsibility for their health, their life, their perception of life too. So absolutely, that was when I became a pirate. To bring it back to bring it back home, when I started my process of developing my awareness, growing in awareness, recognizing that there's parts of me that really do belong to me and I can grow them, they're my gifts, and there's so much of me that are layers to be shed. And that meaning that's the conditioning. That's the conditioning from childhood, from society, from culture, etc. And so now for me, it's living that. And I think that's the most pirate gangster shit that anybody can do, is to live that life that it's absolutely courageous to question everything, question what is me. And that has connected me more to life itself, capital life, God, universe, whatever we want to call it, than anything else. And it has helped me to transcend so much of the smallness that I was operating from. Smallness, or we could say, for anybody that this makes sense to, the ego state that I was living from for so much of my life. And that means I really have sovereignty and agency to think for myself. And my education growing up, I mean, I was going to the best, one of the best schools in my city, certainly one of the best engineering programs in the world. And to realize that I had to figure out what it was for me to think for myself, like what that really, really means, that's profound. And what that also gives me access to is, hey, I am very much likely not the only person that has not realized what it really means to think for ourselves and to have this capacity to choose or suspend. I love it. Suspend belief. Like, rather than believing everything that's thrown at me or being defensive about something that isn't my opinion, I can suspend belief and I can become something else that is curious and open and flexible and flowing, and all these different qualities that lend me to really appreciating life so much more. And when we do that, when I do that, it becomes incredibly natural to march the beat of my own drum, so to speak. And all the and that's pirate, that's very pirate for me, is marching to the beat of my own drum, and not really being concerned with what others say or think or do, knowing fully that how easy it is for my mind to get stuck into something. I notice when my mind is drawn towards something and how easy it is for me to start to confirm biases And that's why I pay very careful attention to where I put my attention, because otherwise I'll just put on another suit of identity and have to feel like I have to stand for something that isn't really me. So that's it.
Mhm.
I pay attention to me, and then from there, I want to teach people that same pathway. I want to inspire, whether it's through teaching yoga, training yoga teachers, teaching meditation, people like, hey, it's your journey. Forget about the rest. Like, go on your journey. And what that really means, like, I feel the necessity to drive home. That's like the idea of I don't know what I don't know, and being open and curious, rather than making the information be all important. Like, what is the experience? Let's have the experience instead of the information. So there.
There was like so many gems in there. And you've answered so many of our questions that we had for you, which is great. I do love a good long rant for sure. Couple of things that came up for me, especially as a nutrition coach. And I love so much what you said about food and using it to numb ourselves. And one of the things that stood out to me about your story is, having this background of using food to numb yourself, using, academic achievement for that external validation. Was there, and then using even fitness as the next kind of addiction, right? Which is also a way. I see so many people at the gym that use fitness as a way to continue to numb themselves, right? Because you don't necessarily, again, you're not in your head when you're doing a hard workout. Was there a pivotal moment? You talked about walking up the hill and having that realization that this is not what you want to do. This is what you want to do. Was there a pivotal moment where you finally stopped numbing yourself and could actually feel that feeling and hear yourself, and have that understanding after, like I said, years of that numbing? What was that switch that finally turned for you?
Mm-hmm. There is a great story for this. It goes back to the vulnerability, because for vulnerability is the here it is. This is what, when I say here it is, here's the feeling I've done so much to avoid in my life, and I'm gonna be with it. I'm gonna sit there and experience it, or I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna see what the story is there. So something to that effect, right? And that's vulnerability and courage as well. Vulnerability and courage are like holding hands to me. And there are many layers to answering that question, because I had many micro steps along the way of opening up more, being more vulnerable, facing my feelings more. However, there was a moment where I became conscious, meaning I recognized in my power the ability to step into that, rather than doing it unconsciously or accidentally, so to speak. So now when I have feelings arise or emotions, I know exactly what I'm going to do with it. And and sometimes I turn offline and do one of the other things, or I distract myself. That still happens. Now I have much more dexterity within myself, my emotional dexterity or mental dexterity of remembering, hey, I can feel this. And I know what happens when I let myself feel it is I get an incredible experience every time. So I'll tell you about that. There's a pivotal moment. And this is more around me in relationships, and shame and fear of rejection. That was tremendous. Those are the biggest bad guys. I use air quotes. Those are the things that human beings tend to run away from the most. A sense of shame and a fear of rejection. So fear and shame. Why? Because they're quite intense feelings. They are showing us about death. They're reminding us that even in this life, we're dying. We're parts of us are dying, having a fantasy, and then the reality is different. And the fantasy had to die, right? So I did a 10-day training, and just before that training, I was listening to this book on vulnerability by a great author, Brene Brown. And what she has done really spectacularly is she turns vulnerability and creates a beautiful awareness around it, meaning it's not just a word anymore. Because so many experiences, we use the word without really connecting to the experience. And so for me, for my whole life, vulnerability was a word, an empty word. I knew the definition. That doesn't mean I knew what vulnerability was or how to embody it, right? And she creates the conversation and awareness around what does it look like to embody vulnerability. And so thank God for Brene. Thank you for that, because it did have a significant impact in my life. And this moment, now that I'm going to get to it, I did a 10-day training I still do yoga courses and training. I teach them, I lead them, and I continue to go to them for myself. And one of my favorite programs I had done, this was the first time I did it, and it cracked me open, huge, is a program taught by a friend, two friends, Jambo and Brian, and they have this course called Yoga Body Workers. And it's for yoga practitioners or body workers to come together and do both at the same time. And what we need to recognize with this is that yoga is a science of moving energy. Emotion is energy. So those things are at play there. And those are not really at the field where we're paying attention to them with our mind, right? If it's, in other words, we can't solve it necessarily by thinking ourselves through it. It has to be moved energetically. Same thing with body work. When we're working on somebody's body, the energy is in the body. It's stored in the body. And so you could have a release, right? A physical release in body work and in yoga, where some huge piece of energy that was stuck there and hadn't been able to move for whatever reason, for some unconscious suppression or repression, it gets moved, and then we would experience that physically in the body, right? So that's what this training is about. So there's a lot of energy work happening in this training, and a lot of, we'll say, healing happening in this. When something gets released, we're better for it, because we're holding on, it's baggage, and then it goes away, but it's no longer weight on our shoulders. So 10 days into this course, it's newer for me. I'm used to being in yoga trainings. I wasn't used to doing so much of the hands-on and touch work. And I started to recognize I had a lot of shame coming up, and also like suppression of sexuality, sexual desire coming up in me. Specifically, like working with somebody I found attractive. And it was really interesting to me to hands-on somebody where I'm attracted to, and it's like, wow, like, what do I do with this energy and these feelings and these thoughts and et cetera, et cetera. And so it was like an incredibly opening experience to me to be in a frame of where I'm paying attention to that rather than in a reactive state to that, or into even worse, the same, suppressing it, putting it sweeping it back into the closet. We don't want to see you right now. Get into the closet. These kinds of experiences. So at the end of that training, there was a girl who I really found myself attracted to. And I noticed when we would work together, I noticed it coming up when I would work together, no pun intended, although that's a bad pun, right? At the end of that training, we sat down and meditated, and we went through this amazing meditation where we would go through different phases of experience, meaning I had to sit with myself and ask, how am I feeling? And let whatever comes up come up and feel it. And whether it's shame, guilt, joy, it could be elevated emotion too. And I got through this meditation, and the last stage of this meditation is, okay, sit with your guides, your teachers, whoever comes. So its eyes are closed, and it's whoever comes into the field of thought or experience is now a guide, and I'm open to hearing anything that they have for me. And so this is a practice of the imagination. And a dear friend of mine who'd passed away, a very good friend of mine who took care of me when I was living in London, he popped up immediately and said, you have to tell her how you feel. And this was relative to the girl I met in training. And I was like, oh my God, I felt fear, and that he came up so quickly. You have to tell her how you feel. And I was like, oh, okay, Roger, I'll do it. Sure. When I get it together and have the courage or bravery, I'll do it. And then immediately after we come out of meditation, the teacher, in this case, his name is Jambo. He goes, okay, now the person sitting next to you, you're going to sit together and you're going to talk. You're going to share your experience. Well, guess who's sitting next to me is the girl. So I was like, oh my God, I'm getting all the physiological reaction of, nerves, anxiety, sweating in my armpits, like elevated heart rate. And it's the first time I've ever been so aware of it. It's like, oh, that's there. This is what vulnerability feels like. Oh my goodness. This is me doing it. Really. We're doing this. And I just was like, I'll go first. I told her, and it was not the end of the world. I didn't die a horrible death. It wasn't rejecting. And it was the first time, and she was a friends to this day, unavailable to me at that time in terms of my feelings, but friends to this day. With that person, she was able to listen to me and hold what I was offering in a non-judgmental way, which is like I would say the universe divinely orchestrated for me to have that experience in that moment, because it was the safest I could have been, in terms of like the worst case manifesting for me. It was the first time that I really stepped in and realized, okay, so these are the feelings right now, and here's my opportunity to act, not running away from them, act going into them rather than the other direction. And I'm like, there's nothing more empowering. I'll use the term healing again, when we act with awareness in the moment, like those things lining up together. That is, for me, it's divine grace. It's the most empowered an individual can be, is act with these feelings in this moment in a way that is not running away from them. And so that was a very special moment where I recognized, okay, this is what being with it means. And I've now, I got that as a download of like, okay, this is how I can operate in the future. And I've had even more significant experiences where I feel energetically shifted, when I do that. When even it's terrifying and the mind is going, what are you doing? This is crazy, blah, 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 blah. And yet I'm aware of the feelings and taking the action, and the energy that is being released in that action is, it's like we use the element of fire because it transforms things, right? It burns things away. And in spiritual parlance, fire is the thing that burns away everything that isn't real, the illusion. And so I'm here walking through the story or the illusion or the fantasy of life I've created, and I'm dispelling that. I'm walking into the reality, which is the present moment experience. And I'm getting all this tremendous amount of freedom and personal freedom and liberation from that, because I'm aligning myself with the truth, with like capital truth, like my truth, and the process of it. So there's no action that's more valuable to me in life, period, than that action of being with the intensity of whatever we're feeling and acting toward, like, into them rather than away from them, whatever that action is, because it tells us that all our greatest fears are a bunch of BS most of the time, 99% of the time. So yeah, that's my story about learning how to be with things rather than numb them out or run away from them. It's very rich, very rich for me. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, and I love your answer, and it's always something that, like I said, for me with my clients, binging is a common, like you said, I think you said like 85% of people, and I find so many of my clients do have binging episodes, and that's why mindset and the story work that we do plays a huge role in my nutrition coaching practice as well, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't we don't need to be told to eat more broccoli and less Twinkies. Like that's just
That's,
it's not the problem, right? It's not the
I don't
issue.
know. Some people might need it.
Well, maybe some, maybe some. One of the things that you kept mentioning was, and which we love, is about taking action. And so much of your story that you've told us is about the different actions that you've taken to make your life down the path that you wanted to go to, and to make changes. So, what small, bold actions are you taking? Have you been taking lately in your
Mm-hmm.
life to make
Mm.
some changes?
Thank you for that question. Action. There's the great saying that uh, the road to hell is paved with great intention or good intentions. And then the other side of that saying is that the road to heaven is paved with good action. So it's learning by doing. That is or creating the experience by living it and doing it. For me, it is being more oriented in an implementation of my intentions of my work. So I feel like I've got a degree of mastery over my personal health and wellness, and have cultivated and continue to cultivate a really good relationship with myself, and that precipitates outwardly with my experience of the world and my experience of how people perceive me as well. So that's a beautiful place to be. And one of the great things is when we do pull up these layers and shed these layers, and we start acting on and integrating how we want to be more aligned through action, that gets to go on autopilot, and then it's a different soil that we're growing from than before. So I say that to say, like, I've done a lot of hard years of consistent work to get me in a place where I feel good about where I feel comfortable in my skin. And so now my action is much more oriented towards how am I being of service? Like, how am I setting myself up to express, to share my gifts, to inspire others to live this life, this life of being more aware and taking more agency and being self-empowered, because I feel like that's the best life for anyone to experience, and however it looks. So now I'm much more concerned with, when I write something down. First of all, I write stuff down. I have so many ideas, and I write them down, and I'm putting more energy towards, okay, I got the idea. Let's put it out there. Let's do it. Whether it's teaching a class online, like I know I have the bigger programs down the line, and things that people will pay for, etc. And for me to like market myself, or to get the word out, or to share, those are the little actions that I do, that I make sure when I'm present to it, I do it. I do it instead of thinking it and letting it escape. I do it in that moment, if it's possible, or I set myself up in a way that I will be able to do something like offer a class online, and then I invite a bunch of people to it. So that's my action it's more the small steps of building my business, building my brand, all in the same vein of being, the inner explorer that I am, using it all as an opportunity to learn about me too. It's all an opportunity to learn about me and connect more with life, and it's a great opportunity also to share and to offer to people, and to get people involved in something that I believe is really good and supportive of them learning what's, like, discovering what's good for them, rather than me telling people what's good for them, which everybody wants to know what's good for them. But I've learned through my experience, it's like I have to figure it out for myself. So what are the tools of that? Share it with people. Let's take the class. Let's do the yoga together. Something like that. So those are the smaller actions, is being more intentional about, when I write something down, I do it. I take actions to make that happen.
And one of the things that like kept coming up with what you were saying and what you just said, people taking their own action. And one of the biggest hurdles to overcome what social rebellion is realizing no one's coming to save you. Like, it's in your own. So if you want to create change, it starts within. And that brings me around to, will you please share with us what Jefe means and what Jefe living is?
Absolutely. Jefe, Jefe, that's a nickname that one of my best friends in college started calling me, and then a group of friends started calling me, and I was none the wiser. I thought he's from Miami. I thought he was saying my name, which is Jeff with a silent J, and I just was like, okay, Jefe, great. When I moved to France, another friend there started calling me Jefe without any connection to the other group of friends. And so I thought, okay, this name, Jefe, is like, it's a real nickname for whatever reason. Come to find out, like a year later, I realized it's the Spanish word for boss or for leader. And I thought that was that was really funny. And I had to wonder, okay, what were people seeing in me that they started calling me that? And I think they were really just calling me Jefe because it sounds like Jeff. And at the end of the day, though, I love the nickname and decided to create my brand or my platform, Jefe Living, around it, because Jefe Living to me means, okay, so I take this idea of boss or chief or leader and apply that to my life and say, I'm the leader of my life. The greatest gift, I really believe, I know the greatest gift I've given myself, and it's been really good for me, is recognizing my self-responsibility and making my life what it is. And there's so many layers to that, honestly. And it for me, it has required the journey up to this point and continuing to be aligned with that, with full self-responsibility, whether it's through our actions, words, stories we tell ourselves, whether we're in a story that we've been telling ourselves for years, where we've forgotten that we can do something about it, or we can shift our perspective on it, or this, that, and the other around, how am I taking responsibility in my life? How am I not waiting for some authority figure or some status symbol to tell me how to be? And I can be it. I can figure. The beautiful thing is the process, the journey to that self-discovery of what it is that I am. And all of that entails self-responsibility. And I see it in the world so much. And I'm the worst at being up to date with events because I watch zero news. And I do that because I'm really, really mindful of the impressions that are coming into me, because it's so easy to latch on to some figure that's in authority or power and like make them God, and then I need to listen to what they're saying and how they're telling me how to live, whether it's somebody in Hollywood or somebody in the government or somebody in your neighborhood, doesn't matter. The moment we make them the person that we have to listen to know how to be, that's self-abandonment. And that is a really empty place to be, it's a very lost place to be, because we're no longer connected to ourselves. Like this is how I perceive it. We're no longer connected to ourselves, and really living our life. And I mean, however many years in the road, of course that serves to some degree, but the life that I choose to live, the life that is in alignment with, I feel, my deepest truth, that's what I came here for. Like, that's what I'm here for. There's nothing else that matters to me other than that. And the more I orient myself to it, the more connected to life I feel. And I know how fragile that relationship is too. I know how easy it is for me to get caught up in some story and to start believing something and make an identity around it because it's sensational. So I really make it a strong point for me to use my inner compass as much as possible. And that for me is everything that I try to teach people and try to empower people with through yoga, through meditation, through courses, through really age-old and time-tested sciences of living that connect us to ourselves, rather than feeling like we need to have it something else telling us how to be. It's like, understand my nature, and then I can live accordingly. And that's a big deal. Like, that's been years for me and still going, understanding my nature. And so the sooner that people get turned on to that, and start to live in that way, then they can start attracting the teachers and the people that are like me and like us, that are doing this, that are teaching people this stuff and supporting them in that way. And that's what I want for the world. I feel like that's me being aligned with me. And that's also my greatest impact, is being really clear with my story and knowing that, okay, I came from unawareness. I came from being very identified with my thoughts and thinking things should be this and that. And I've had an incredible evolution to being more aware and more present and understanding what those words mean for me. And so and how incredibly beautiful life is because of that. And so Jefe Living has become a platform for sharing meditation practice with people, which meditation for me is the art of developing awareness. It's the skill to develop awareness. And then everything can grow from that. And meditation, yoga training, conscious communication, those are the things that I'm sharing with people through coaching, through courses, through collaborations as well. So that's Jefe, and that's where it came from, and that's what it really, really means to me.
Yeah, I love all of that. And where can our listeners go to find you and to find out more about Jefe Living?
You can, thank you for asking. You can follow me on Instagram if you have it, at Jefe. That's JEFE_AF. And that means, what that translates to is Jeff as fuck. It's being me. It's being authentic, right? You can go to Jefe Living, jefeliving.com. That's my website. I promote through Instagram a lot, and you can see what I'm sharing through the link in my profile. And if you want, I've got oh, I don't know if this is visual or not, but I have a planner, a 30-day meditation planner that aligns meditation, the meditation practice, with journaling, because I think they're the two greatest allies in developing this self-awareness for us. So you can get that too. You can get a digital version or a physical copy if you want, and you can join me for a free 30-day program of listening to my recorded meditations, and we can do it together as a community. So yeah, that's how Jefe Living is elevating consciousness.
That's awesome. Is the journal, is that available on your website then?
Yep, totally.
Cool. Yeah, check that out.
Yeah, I love the pictures. I love the pictures that or you keep putting up too with your and the other people's face.
Oh yeah,
half your face on the journal. Yes. So, yeah. And before we wrap up today, Jeff, we have a very important one. Do you know any good pirate jokes?
Oh yes, I'm so glad you set me up for this. Why couldn't the young child go to the pirate movie?
Why?
Because it was rated R.
Awesome.
That's also the corniest. It's the only and the corniest and the funniest and the lamest pirate joke I know.
It's a great one.
All of them.
Well, it's so good to have a nice chat with you. I mean, we've been a part of the Enlifted community together for a long time, and this is the first time I've gotten to sit down and actually talk with you. I'm not sure if you and Kristen have met in real life before. No, so it's special for all of us. So thank you so much for your time today, and it was really great getting to know you and your story and hearing all about your pirate life. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, you guys. Thank you. And I look forward to listening to these shows you guys are putting out. Thank you for spreading the good pirate message, pirate living.